The war between Israel and Hamas has entered the fourth day with the number of deaths on the rise. We have Amos Yadlin, the former head of Israel's Directorate of Military Intelligence, to help us understand what is happening. Major General Yadlin has 40 years of service in the Air Force. Since November 2011, he has been the director of the Institute for National Security Studies, Israel's leading strategic think tank. Thank you for speaking to NDTV, sir.
Good afternoon, and I'm with you.
Yes, sir. So the sudden attack on Israel by Hamas has been incredibly shocking. And the big question on everybody's mind is why and how was Israel's military and intelligence apparatus blindsided? What are your views on that, sir?
We don't know yet, and we have to debrief it because the consequences was catastrophic. What we know that there was no early warning. Whether the signals were there or the signals were there and they were not picked up from the noise. It was a surprise attack, very much like September 11, Pearl Harbor, Yom Kippur War, and this should be investigated at the end of the war. We're now looking forward. But after the intelligence failure, there was an operational failure because the forces on the ground and a very sophisticated fence should give time to the forces to stop the enemy, even if they don't have an early warning. There are a lot of sensors along the border, and somebody was able to neutralize them, and this is also to be investigated at the end of the war. But we are witnessing a terror organization, Daesh-like, killing on intentions, women, children, civilians, in a very cruel way, set them in fire, raping, killing children, killing women, and this Israel will not tolerate. So after the first attack, we are now moving to change the rules of the game.
Right. Major General Yadlin, so you're talking about signals that were not picked up. So if we talk about what's happening domestically in Israel, starting from the fall of the previous government and the elections, we also saw, protests during judicial reforms. Do you see this as a major distraction for the security apparatus?
I think you are raising excellent point because I spoke about intelligence, I spoke about the military on the ground, and you cannot avoid the question of the leadership. The bucks stop here on the Prime Minister desk. And the fact that he led Israel to 9 months of debate on something which is not important, and he neglected the national security. And he got all the warnings from his own defense minister, his own intelligence, people like me who are independent analysts, saying, pay attention. Israel deterrence is deteriorating. The enemy see the crisis, the partition between the two camps in Israel, and they will take advantage of it. And they haven't listened. So 3 failures.
Right. Major General, the symbolism of the timing of the attack is something that everyone has been talking about. Several people have said that this has brought back memories of the Yom Kippur War that started 50 years ago and in some ways reset this whole equation in West Asia. So clearly this attack was well planned on the Hamas side, and it was very different from what has happened in the past. So who is supporting Hamas in all of this? Who are the beneficiaries?
Okay, 2 questions. You said that it's very similar to Yom Kippur War. I fully agree. There is so many similarities. A holiday, a leadership that remoted from reality, military that is not ready, intelligence which is not giving the early warning. And we are now on the 4th day of the fight, of the war. And remember, Yom Kippur War was 18 days. This can be even longer, and it just started. What Israel was able to do in the last 3 days is to kill all the terrorists that came to Israel, hundreds of them, another thousands of them on the fence on the Gaza side, those who want to informed to come to Israel in the second and the third night. In this case, the Israeli Air Force was very effective. And we are now rebuilding and blocking the fence. So this is the time of defense. But we are moving to an attack. And Israel decided that Hamas and his military power will not be in Gaza after the end of the operation. Because according to the Oslo Accord, Palestinian state or Palestinian Authority entity near Israel will not be materialized. It will be without a military. And unfortunately, the Netanyahu government gave Hamas the opportunity to build a military in Gaza. This should be changed.
Right.
On your question, who is supporting Hamas?
Yes.
Hamas is part of the bad guys in the Middle East. It's Iran, it's Syria, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and so is Hamas. Hamas is not 100% an Iranian proxy, but they are getting a lot of Iranian money, Iranian weapons, and this is the time to look at Hamas as if it is ISIS. They behave like ISIS. In a way, ISIS is not as cruel as Hamas. So how they treat young women, they rape them, they kill them. ISIS haven't done that. So Hamas is now to be eradicated and destroyed.
Right. So you've touched upon this, but you've also seen and commanded many such situations in the past. So what was different about this attack by Hamas this time?
Israel was very efficient against the previous attempts of Hamas to go through tunnels. And we built a wall 40 meters below the soil. And we were very effective against the rockets, long-range rockets, short-range rockets, by having efficient early warning to the population. Once again, they are firing against civilians. They are firing against innocent people. But the people of Israel know how to get the warning and to go to their shelters. And we developed the best and efficient anti-rocket system, the Iron Dome, and other missile defense system. So when Hamas understood that rockets is not operative for them, is not useful for them, tunnels they cannot use, they developed another strategy. And here is the Israeli failure, that were not ready to an attack through the fence above the ground, and simultaneously in 10 or 15 areas, and without early warning. This is something that Hamas planned and executed in a way that surprised Israel.
Major General Yadlin, in the last 3 days, there was an offensive and retaliation by the Israeli army and IDF. So how do you see this kind of retaliation? Because the blockade in terms of food and fuel and water, do you also see some sort of a humanitarian crisis emerging in this region, which has anyway been very evasive to peace?
Since we changed our paradigm and we don't anymore see Hamas as a address for negotiation, for arrangement, for ceasefires. We are now in a full siege of Gaza. It will lead to humanitarian crisis, but it's Hamas who should be blamed. Remember, they have children and women and elderly in their hand, those who they haven't killed. And if they care about humanitarian, first, they have to return all the non-combatants that they took as kidnapped people. So the whole guilty and responsibility is on Hamas, and Israel is going to be very, very tough. We are not going to play the same game as we played in the past. We pay a high price. 1,000 people were killed. It's more than have been in Bombay. It's more than September 11. If you take it to the numbers, it's 40,000 people if the US would have lose in September 11. So we are going to be very aggressive until Hamas will be destroyed as ISIS was destroyed.
Right, Major General. Now, moving to the larger geopolitical picture and the impact of the war, U.S. has announced a hike in military aid to Israel, and it's also sending military and Navy ships closer to Israel. How do you think this support that Israel is getting, especially from allies and particularly, from the U.S., how do you see this, and what is the criticality of the role of the U.S. in this whole matter?
Yeah, Israel will protect itself by itself. We had a failure. We will correct it. Wars are not decided in the first day. It took the Russians to defeat the Nazis 3 years. It took the Brits to defeat the Nazis 6 years. And it took the US 3 or 4 years to defeat the Japanese. So wars are going to be long. We feel that we are in a war. I'm not sure it will be limited to Gaza only. We are putting a lot of attention and intelligence and operational forces vis-a-vis the north, vis-a-vis Hezbollah. The Americans came to make sure that the bad guys in the Middle East, the axis of evil, the axis of terrorism, the axis of radicalism will not win. This is Iran, Hezbollah, Syria, the militias in Iraq, and the Houthis. And there is another axis of pro-Western, some of them democracies like Israel, the US, Saudi, that don't want to see Iran taking over the Middle East. So the Americans came to deter Hezbollah and Iran from entering the war. Whether this is an effective deterrence, the future will tell, because the American credibility in the Middle East is not that high. After Afghanistan, after the fact that they were not so successful in Iraq, and everybody knows that America is now concentrating on China and Russia, but China and Russia are supporting Iran. And if you look at it globally, the Americans have said, we haven't left the Middle East. And there is only one superpower that can project a real military might to the Middle East, and this is the US of America.
Right, sir. So clearly, different countries are not on the same page. But what kind of changes do you expect this war to have on larger geopolitics? You talked about China now. What does this mean, particularly, with the peace efforts going on in the Middle East and China in Asia, particularly in the context of US brokering peace in the Palestine issue?
It's too early to see the long-term consequences. First, we have to see what will be the result of this war, whether Israel will be able to defeat Hamas, is Hezbollah joining to defeat Hezbollah, what the US will do. It's too early to see. I see what can be the results of this if Israel will win, and I have no doubt that Israel will win.
Right.
We will have to renew the negotiation on normalization with the Saudis. We will have to create a stronger and more credible allies against the Iranian axis of evil and against the terrorists from the other side, the Hamas terrorists, the Daesh terrorists. So we have a lot of negative forces in the Middle East, and if the other forces can defeat them, it will be in the long run a positive move. Look what happened after Yom Kippur. It was a very, very tough war, but in a couple of years later, it's brought peace with Egypt. Israel peace with Egypt is very stable, and it's for decades. So from every failure, you should, at the end, see the opportunities and hoping to a stable Middle East.
Right. Right, sir. We were talking about Iran. Now, while Iran has consistently denied any role in this attack, we also know that Hezbollah is a central player in what happens next with regard to Israel. So another front is also open now. What is the likely response on the ground, and Israel's military ready for this?
Yes, the Israeli military will not be surprised in the north because we are already in a war. And the assumption is that if there is an early warning, Israel will preempt. If there is no early warnings, there is enough operational forces to absorb the Hezbollah attack. We don't know what Nasrallah will think and whether he got a command from his Iranian masters to attack Israel. He's very careful. He remembered 2006. Lebanon is in a huge crisis, and he knows what the Israeli Air Force can do there. But he may misjudge, as he did in the past. And then what we see in Gaza will be duplicated in a much more forceful way vis-a-vis Hezbollah.
Right, sir. And many people have also said that it is time for Israel to possibly completely change its approach to Gaza and also launch an offensive on the West Bank. How do you see Israel's response to this attack? And I know I've asked you this question, but how calibrated should it be in the coming days?
Yeah, the West Bank, we don't need to launch any offensive. From security point of view, holding the West Bank quite well. There are terrorists there, but getting into the Palestinian cities will not make it better, because we are going there when we have any information about terrorists. It's more of a policing way. Vis-a-vis Gaza, I already said, the paradigm of thinking that Hamas care about the 2 million people, about their welfare, about their jobs, about their food, about their electricity is gone. They want war, and they will get war.
Sir, in the last few days, one fascinating aspect was the kind of reservists who went back to their country to defend the nation. What kind of militarization, what kind of impact does this kind of militarization have on the country and the region?
Israel is get used to use its military force when it's needed. We are a peace-loving nation. We want peace with our neighbor. We were able to have peace with Egypt, with Jordan, with the UAE. But if somebody pushes us to the corner, he will see that Israel knows how to fight and how to win. And this is part of our national security paradigm. You have to look for peace all the time, but if somebody attacking you, it's a cruel region with barbaric rules of engagement, and we will adapt to it.
Right. My last question to you, sir. India and Israel are known to have close ties, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has just spoken to Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu. Do you see India brokering peace between the two sides, given the history of dehyphenation?
Israel and India relations are very important. We are two nations that got our independence in the same time. We are two nations that are democratic nations with some British tradition. Two nations that have enemies on the border. You have Pakistan, you have China, we have the terrorists from Gaza and Hezbollah and Syria and Iran. So there is a lot of the same political background, and Israel is helping India a lot with weapons that they are now used to buy from Russia, and now they shift some of it from Israel. And we are welcoming any attempt by your Prime Minister to mediate or to advance peace. However, to put the expectation in the right place, Hamas is not willing to do any negotiation, any peace. They are not recognizing what the PA in Ramallah recognized in 1933, that Israel right to exist, that terror should be denounced, and they will do everything to negotiate peace. Hamas is not there. Hamas is a terror organization. But if Modi can make the miracle, we will hold our finger for him.
Right. Thank you, Major General Amos Yadlin, for speaking to NDTV and putting things in perspective for us. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.